Welcome back. I just told you about President Trump's latest wave of pardons to family, friends, and convicted murderers. Most people do not consider many of these pardons ethical, moral, or proper, but they may be legal. He does have the authority to issue these pardons and more, and he might, in fact, just be getting warmed up for more pardons, including potentially for himself. I want to bring in Glenn Kirshner. He's a former federal prosecutor and an MSNBC legal analyst. We also have New York Times national security and legal reporter Charlie Savage, who is the author of a book I read some years ago, and it becomes more important every time Charlie and I talk through this administration. It's called Power Wars: The Relentless Rise of Presidential Authority and Secrecy. You are just the two guys to talk to about this. Glenn, let me start with you and the pardons of the 4 Blackwater contractors. These are mercenaries. They're soldiers for hire. They opened fire on a number of people, most of whom were civilians not involved in any way in the war in Iraq, and they were convicted properly by a court. In fact, it was a difficult and long court case that involved shipping people over to provide testimony. You had a very strong view on this when you and I talked about it the other day.
I did, Ali. When you realize that these 4 Blackwater contractors, and let's call them what they are, convicted killers, pardoned though they may be now, when these men opened fire on innocent, unarmed Iraqi men, women, and children who were literally just trying to pass through a security checkpoint to get to work, to sort of carry on with their daily lives. They opened fire, and what they did was they just assassinated 17 innocent Iraqis. They injured 14 others. And then the Department of Justice, and specifically my former office, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, spent the better part of a decade trying to fight for justice for those Iraqi victims for what was done to them on their soil by these American contractors. And Ali, I hope if there is one enduring message that the world can take away from this, it's not Donald Trump's callous, reckless signature on pardons, trying to wipe the slate clean, but rather the nearly 10 years that the power and the resources and the determination of the federal government and the Department of Justice poured into these prosecutions to vindicate what was done to those Iraqi victims. That is what America is all about, not Donald Trump's pardons.
I think you've got a good point there. Charlie, in the Constitution, Section 2, Clause 1 reads, "The President shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment," which is a separate issue which we can discuss. It's called plenary authority. Most people don't dispute that the President has this pardon power. There will be disputes if the President, as he says, pardons himself. He says he's got the authority for this. But this does fall into a larger category of the authority that the executive has that most people didn't care about all that much, Charlie. And even when your book came out, most people didn't care about it all that much. As you once told me, as long as it's your guy in the office, you're fine with him taking more authority than the law maybe says he should. What we've learned in the last 4 years is that presidents have tried this process. They've taken more and more authority from other branches of government, and we've let them get away with it.
Well, it's true that the power of the presidency has been swelling far beyond, I think, what the founders intended it to be 200 plus years ago, especially since the Cold War, and then again after a sort of a blip of reset since the Watergate period, it has grown again. This one, though, is one that they did intend for presidents to have. There was some debate around the Constitution about whether it was too dangerous because a president could tell someone to commit a crime for his own personal benefit and then pardon him. I think George Mason warned about that. But in the end, they decided to leave this power in there. It's plenary, as you say, that basically means unrestricted. And so some of the questions people have surrounding these extremely controversial pardons are, well, can Biden come in and undo them? And the answer is basically no. The people who are pardoned forever, even if it was a corrupt pardon, even if they paid off President Trump, hypothetically, to wipe away their legal consequences of past crimes. That could be a separate crime. They could be prosecuted, perhaps, and Trump could be or whoever the president would be hypothetically or bribery, but for the thing that they have been granted clemency for, it's gone forever in terms of legal consequences. Still, there's some interesting things about this. We were just talking about the Nisor Square Blackwater contractors. Another set, as your viewers well know, are these Russia investigation figures, including people like Roger Stone and Paul Manafort, who did not cooperate with investigators and may still know things that they didn't tell. And that's why they're being rewarded now. And so one thing that can happen now is that they can be brought into a grand jury or before a committee of Congress under subpoena and forced to say what they know. And if they refuse to testify or they lie now, because they have no right against self-incrimination because of the pardon, that could be a new crime. So there may still be some ways if the next administration or the next Congress wants to drag this out. On the other hand, there may just be a look forward and not look back attitude, and this is over.
Glenn Kirshner, the reason I think we have to not take a don't look back and let this be over view is, first of all, we have 25 more days in which the president has shown himself to be remarkably creative in his use of pardons, and he happens to be trying to overturn the results of a duly won election. That worries me a little bit because a few legal experts have floated ideas about the things that he can do to encourage people to possibly break the law with the idea that he'll pardon them for doing so if it furthers his political aims. You saw this statistic that the New York Times cited by this Harvard professor who indicates that 88% of Donald Trump's pardons have gone to people, pardons or commutations have gone to people in a way that would benefit him politically or personally.
Yeah, and I think we all felt like a pardon palooza was coming, and now we have seen at least wave one. And I can't help but feel, Allie, that Donald Trump pardoning Jared Kushner's father was simply a way of softening the ground for what may be more familial pardons coming. And, I guess I have a slightly different view from Charlie about whether these pardons can ever be attacked in court. The truth of the matter is there's very little legal precedent. And I understand we all have opinions about how a court might rule if a corrupt pardon was challenged, but the plenary pardon power can contradict other powers in the Constitution, like the care to faithfully execute the laws of the country. So I would hope that when we have a law-abiding, law-enforcing attorney general, and I think we're all certain that we are all about to have a law-abiding attorney general, whoever that may be, I hope there's serious consideration given to challenging corrupt pardons in court so that, our opinions are fine, but let's get a judicial ruling on just how far a corrupt president can push the pardon power.
Gentlemen, it's an interesting discussion and one that we're going to have to keep on having because there are probably more pardons coming and we need to figure out how to handle this in the future. Glenn Kirshner is a former federal prosecutor and an MSNBC legal analyst. Charlie Savage is a New York Times national security and legal reporter and the author of Power Wars, The Relentless Rise of Presidential Authority and Secrecy. You can catch Capital Crimes with Glenn Kirshner at 10 p.m. tonight, by the way, right here on MSNBC.